lack of effective communication within the family. I see that time and time again. Parents are not listening to their children, so children don't want to open up to their parents. So there's just no communication. And maybe a child is feeling really, sad or low about something, but the parent might just say, "Oh, it's okay, you'll be fine, don't worry."
Right.
So sort of not acknowledging those feelings. And I think we need to be acknowledged, especially as children. We need to be acknowledged, and just to be told whatever you're feeling is okay. There's no right or wrong. It's okay. It's part of being a human being.
Welcome back to a brand new episode of Tell Me Why, which is a Gulf News original podcast. Today's episode coincides with the back to school season. So a lot of children are back to school. And that is a tough period for kids these days, that first day of school or even that first week. And it is also tough on parents. There are a lot of emotions. There's a transitioning back to school after a long period of just holidays and vacations and, sleep routines that are disrupted. So joining me in the studio today is Jasmine Navarro, who is a family well-being expert, or a family coach, as she likes to call it. Jasmine, welcome to our studio. How are you?
Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for having me. I'm good, thanks.
So before we get started, tell us about your background. So you are a family coach. Tell us about your experience as a family coach and even as a teacher, because you used to teach for a very long time. So you've dealt with children for quite some time now.
Exactly, yes. So I was a teacher for about 18 years, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It makes me feel really old thinking about it. And I taught in 11 countries. And I taught primary, secondary and adults.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I had quite a lot of experience doing that. And then I became a coach.
Okay.
So I wanted to help teenagers with self-confidence, anxiety, emotional regulation, effective communication, and all of those things.
Teaching in 11 countries.
Yes.
Has that shown you that, children everywhere have the same struggles?
No, exactly. Children have the same struggles.
Everywhere.
And I just thought, emotions speak the same language. Wherever you are, wherever I was, it was the same.
I really like that. Emotions speak the same language. That's actually fantastic.
Yeah.
And did teaching inspire you to become a family coach?
Actually, it was my own, when I was a teenager, I went through my own difficult challenges.
Okay.
And I went through traumatic grief. But anyway, so that led me to leave the UK and become a teacher.
Right.
And after 18 years of teaching, I just thought, I really want to change my career. And then I found coaching. At the beginning, I decided to coach adults. Mm-hmm. But then I remembered when I was a teenager and the tools and techniques I learned through my coach training, I just thought they would have benefited me so much when I was growing up. So then I thought I need to share this with teenagers today.
You mentioned you went through grief, and that's what led you to leave the UK. Do you mind telling us about that?
Yeah, sure. So I was 18 and I was really close to my stepdad. He brought me up and him and my mum, they were separated, and I didn't see him for a while. And then I went to my friend's house, and then one day she just said, "Oh, did you know that he's died?" And she found out in the newspaper, the local newspaper. So, I went home and I told my mum, I said, "Oh my God, he's died." And then she went out, got the newspaper, and she said, "Yes, and he's never coming back." And it just, I don't know what happened. I just froze. I just felt like I was hit with so many emotions. And I just completely lost myself. Lost everything, or lost myself. And, I didn't have any emotional awareness anyway, because we didn't really have that effective communication. Right. So I probably would never have been prepared for that, but I wasn't prepared at all. I didn't have any access to my inner resources.
Right.
So, I was depressed for about 8 years on and off.
Oh,
it was a long time because I just blamed myself. There was a lot of things to that story. So I really blamed myself, and I didn't feel like I deserved to grieve because he wasn't my real dad, and nobody around me was acknowledging it. Everybody was just getting on with their lives. My friends were 18, so they were just going out having fun. And I was just like, but, I've just lost, my life is just shattered, crumbled. And I just isolated myself. I didn't want to talk to anyone because I couldn't do anything. So nobody understood me. So I just wanted to be on my own.
Right.
So, but eventually I worked through it. Like I said, 8 years, because finally I stopped blaming myself. But I didn't have any help or anything. I just came to that conclusion by myself. And I think had I have had help or somebody to really talk to and understand, then it would have been quicker. I don't know.
Right. Really sorry that you had to go through that. And
no, thanks.
And as I mentioned, I mean, it's great to see that children these days are getting the help that they need. The things that we missed out on, maybe it still gives you peace to feel like, you know what, at least it's not the case anymore, and there are more resources in a way.
I think so.
You mentioned blaming yourself. Do you mind me asking why you were blaming yourself?
I know this is another part to the story.
Okay.
So my mum just said when he died, she said he probably committed suicide.
Okay.
But she didn't know, but we just knew that he was really, really unhappy because he had a lot of problems. So I think that's where it came from.
Okay.
Because years later I learnt that when there is a suicide in the family, you do blame yourself.
Of course.
That's quite a normal reaction. Yeah, so I just blamed myself. And then, I was feeling all these emotions. I didn't know what I was feeling. So many. It completely knocked me out. And, I didn't like those emotions, probably. So I began not to like myself. Plus, I was blaming myself. So it was self-destruction. Self-destruction.
My goodness, that must have been very tough to work through. And
yes. And imagine, so for 8 years I believed that. But then after 10 years, I found out it wasn't a suicide. I didn't find out until 10 years' time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So imagine.
I grieved a suicide.
Yeah. And the thing is that it goes back to what you were saying. It's all in your head. Yes. Like with kids and teenagers, a lot of the struggles are just in their head.
And it's not even real.
That's fantastic, when you can relate back to like personal experiences and you feel, I wish I could have had that kind of support growing up. And you know what? I want to give back. Like I want to do that for everyone else that needs it.
Exactly.
So in your experience as a teacher and as a family coach, what are some of the main challenges that children face?
I think a lot of challenges that they come to me with, wanting to be perfect. I hear this a lot. I need to be perfect. The pressure that they're putting on themselves, maybe exam pressure, peer pressure, the pressure that they're putting on themselves is actually much heavier. Anxiety, not fitting in, bullying, being alone. So many teenagers I work with, they don't have any friends.
That's so sad.
It's so sad, and they spend so much time alone, maybe thinking about their problems, and then they just isolate themselves even more. And it just spirals if they don't get the help that they need at the time.
Yeah. And do you feel like some students might still feel alone even if they do have friends?
I think so, yeah. If they're not talking, if they're not being themselves.
Right.
If they're trying to be somebody else to fit in, then definitely they can feel alone.
Exactly.
So it's about really expressing themselves and accepting themselves for who they are and showing others who they are so friends can accept them for who they are. But I think this is the problem sometimes.
And peer pressure is a big one, I feel. A lot of us fall into that, even as adults. Like There's always peer pressure. You'd think after all these years and after all these coping mechanisms and all these books and self-development methods, we'd be able to eradicate peer pressure, but we haven't been able to. Do you feel like that still affects children these days?
I think so, because I think, they want to fit in. And even as adults, sometimes we want to fit in. So it's about being accepted by others. But I think that always comes from how we accept ourselves. It always comes from ourselves, the relationship we have with ourselves. So that's what I work with them on, building that relationship with themselves so they can really accept who they are and love themselves,
Right.
which is a whole process in itself.
So speaking about the process, actually, what does that entail? Like, what do you actually do to get tell us briefly. I know this is a long journey and you spend so much time with these children to help them gain that confidence. But can you tell us briefly, like, what are some of the methods that you use, like how you help them as a coach?
I think the first thing is, I say to them, whatever you say, it's not right or wrong. So there's no judgment here. It's a safe space. I'm not expecting you to say anything or not say anything. So I think that helps to make them relaxed. And, I listen. I think a lot of active listening goes in. And, I don't jump in and try to fix them because they don't need to be fixed. It's like I help them find their voice. So I do that by active listening, lots of questioning, lots and lots of questioning. Right. So what do you think about this? What's important about that for you? What do you love? All of these open questions. And, validating them, it's okay. Whatever you're feeling is okay. There's no positive or negative feelings. Right. Each feeling has a message and we just need to listen to that message. And just, and I don't force them to do anything. That's really, really important. I really have a gentle approach. And, some teenagers and children might open up straight away, but others take longer, and that's fine too. Right. They can open up as much or as little as they want to. Mm-hmm. It's all about their time, their space. So I think that really does help. And eventually they open up, and then more questions. It's always questions.
That's really nice. I find it, you said something that was really beautiful. I'm not there to fix them. There's nothing to fix. It's just a matter of helping them find themselves. They're not broken. And I think a lot of children might feel that way. They feel like they're broken. They feel like they're not good enough. So that's one thing that I really liked with what you were saying. And active listening. That really resonated. Do you feel like parents are not listening enough to their kids these days?
I think so. I think in general, people don't listen, do we? I mean, I listen more now since coaching and things like that. But I think in general, we don't listen. And I think we just always jump in and we want to offer that solution. We feel like that's what we need to do. But actually, most of the time, we just need to listen and don't say anything. And just that feeling of being heard, seen and heard, that helps us feel validated, important. And we will always find our own solutions anyway. You know, if somebody's listening to you, you can figure out the answers yourself, can't you?
Exactly.
It's just nice to have that person there holding the space.
Yes.
Rarely we want to do what someone's telling us to do.
Exactly.
Same for teenagers.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so let's move towards the parents a bit. What do you feel like the challenges are with parents?
I think it's a lack of effective communication within the family.
Okay.
I really feel like I see that time and time again. Parents are not listening to their children, so children don't want to open up to their parents. So there's just no communication. And maybe a child is feeling really sad or low about something, but the parent might just say, oh, it's okay, you'll be fine, don't worry.
Right.
So sort of not acknowledging those feelings. And I think we need to be acknowledged, especially as children. We need to be acknowledged, and just to be told whatever you're feeling is okay. There's no right or wrong. It's okay. It's part of being a human being.
Right.
We have these feelings. We will always have them. Of course, if they're feeling really, really anxious and depressed and they can't get out of bed, then of course that's something else, and that's not a normal situation, and maybe they need to see a therapist or psychologist.
Right.
But our normal feelings, sadness, anxiety, if it's not debilitating, then we just need to accept these feelings and dig deeper as to why we're feeling them.
Rather than dismissing them.
Exactly. And suppressing them. 20 years suppressing grief because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. But it's actually, no, we're supposed to feel the feelings.
Yes. From the parents' perspective,
yes.
I just want to go back to that because I feel like as parents, sometimes they'll do things unintentionally. They don't mean to
Exactly.
dismiss their kids' feelings. They don't mean to harm them with their words. They don't mean to put pressure, but sometimes they just don't know the right way to do it. So, do you find it my question is a two-parter. Do you find it difficult to educate parents? Do you find like there's sometimes resistance? And secondly, how do you tell them that they need to change their ways with their kids?
I think it always comes from the same thing. When I'm working with parents, I show them the techniques. They experience the techniques for themselves.
Right.
So maybe we have an active listening exercise. They do it together. If it's a group workshop, then I would show them, they would do it in pairs or something like that. Or if it's me and the parent, I will do active listening with them and they can do it with me. So I really get them to experience these techniques, because you can't just say, oh, listen to your children. Well, you can, but I think they need to experience and feel it for themselves. So it's about helping them increase their self-awareness.
Right.
Because they might not even know they're not listening or they have these habits.
Exactly.
Most of us don't know, do we?
Exactly.
So it's about taking them through the techniques themselves.
Right.
Working on themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the key is that they're unaware.
Totally.
Yeah. A lot of parents are unaware that they're making these, I want to say, mistakes, just because they can be rectified. I mean, it's not a big deal, but they can always be rectified once recognized. Going into back to school. And the name of our show is Tell Me Why. So I'm going to ask you why parents should not be anxious about their kids going back to school.
That's true. It's a good question. But I wouldn't say they shouldn't feel anything.
Okay.
Because when I'm working with teenagers' parents, it's all about accepting feelings.
Right.
So they can feel that, but it's how they react, how they respond to their feelings.
Great.
So, and sometimes you can feel anxious about being anxious.
Right.
So it's about responding, how they respond. So I'd say you can feel that, but what's making you feel like that? So I would dig deeper into that. But I think, feeling anxious about change is a normal emotion.
Right.
When we're coming out of our comfort zone, we will feel anxious, and that's okay. It's just how we respond to the anxiety. So yeah, it's not about what they shouldn't feel, it's about how they respond to feeling however they're feeling. And it's okay to feel anxious when they're going to school for the first, a new school, it's the first day back. It's okay. They're probably not the only ones feeling this. Probably most of the children are having these insecurities and feeling this. That's okay. So I think the most important thing about that is it's okay to feel anxious on your first day back at school, but talk about it. Right. So it's not just so the child or a parent doesn't feel like they're the only ones feeling this, because once you start isolating yourself with your feelings, they can become bigger and bigger and bigger and really can be overwhelming.
Right.
So it's about talking about it. It's okay. When you talk about things and how you're feeling and somebody is just listening to you and said, that's okay, I'm feeling the same, or you feel better.
Yeah, it calms you down.
And you feel connected to that other person. You don't feel alone. I think that's the danger, is when we start feeling these emotions but we feel alone.
So communication.
Definitely communication.
Okay.
I think it's key.
I like that. I think it's key with everything. With all relationships.
Exactly.
With your friendships, with your marriage, with your kids, with everyone.
Exactly.
With coworkers. I feel like communication is key.
And it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Like, it's okay to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. We had Dr. Summer on the show last week.
Yes.
And she was discussing, actually 2 weeks ago, and she was discussing getting comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And I really like that. That really resonated, because sometimes we are so scared and we make it seem like, oh my gosh, if I'm uncomfortable, like that's the end of the world.
Yes.
It's okay. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Face it, and you'll see that it's not that big of a deal. We spoke about this before the show. My first day of school was always a nightmare. The night before, I could never sleep. I was always overthinking. I never communicated with my parents. Like, I never wanted to show them that I was worried or scared.
Yes.
It was in a way, I was trying to shield them from my, my anxiety and my challenges. And so I would rarely sleep that night before. I would always overthink. I think, would I still have the same friends? Would they still accept me? Am I still going to hang out with the same people? It was just all these thoughts rushing through my brain, and I could never make peace with it. And that first week I was always sleep deprived. I was always worried. I was always nervous. What's your advice to, kids going through that?
That's such a good question. And I think so many children experience that.
Yeah.
I remember experiencing all of those thoughts as well.
Yeah.
I think it's about, smiling. Like, I know that sounds, no, I don't mean just smiling, but I mean when they go to school, smiling at other people in their class, because probably they're feeling exactly the same.
Yeah.
So being that other person, to being the first person to say, do you want to come sit next to me? Or as soon as you break the ice and you start that conversation, you'll make friends. You'll make new friends. And I think it's about, really being the first one to make the move.
Right.
If you're a parent, definitely have this conversation with your child. Like, how are you feeling about your first day at school? What are you most nervous about? What's the worst thing that can happen? Having those questions before, so the child doesn't feel completely alone. I mean, there's not really a straightforward, easy answer, but I do think having the conversation helps. And telling your child, you're definitely not the only one feeling this.
Right.
I just think it's really important to make time to have conversations with your child. Let them know that, if they don't get the high grades in their exams or at school, it's okay. It's okay. They can talk. Let them feel like they can talk to you about anything.
Right.
Not just letting them feel comfortable with telling you the great news, the good things that have happened.
Exactly. Yes.
Let them know that it's okay if things go wrong. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be perfect. We're never going to be perfect. And I just think it's just, when your child feels safe and they can talk to you about anything, they will. They won't go up and be on their own in their room and maybe look on the internet for answers. They'll come to you. So I think it's about, resist being angry with them, just, not judging them, listening to them, let them speak, ask them questions, but really, really listen. And I think naturally they will come to you. And when they can come to you straight away when there's a problem, the problem's solved rather than it escalating to something else.
Just speaking about that actually made me think of another question.
Okay.
So something came to mind. How do you deal with children who have a bully in school?
Yes, and this is quite common as well, unfortunately. It normally happens, teenagers that come to me that are being bullied, they are feeling really bad about themselves. They are beating themselves up, low confidence. They think they deserve the bullying. So first of all, we really work on helping them become conscious of what they're actually thinking and what they're saying to themselves every day. And I would maybe say something like, what do you say to yourself when you look in the mirror in the morning? And it takes them a while to tell me, but normally it's, it's going to be a bad day, or I look terrible, or, they're just criticizing themselves. So we really work on that first, helping them become conscious. And then it's like, well, what can you say to yourself? What makes you feel better? What words do you say to yourself, and how do they make you feel? So so the first step is being conscious of what they're saying, and then what do you want to say to yourself? And then what action can you take at school? And just tiny, tiny, tiny steps each day that they choose to take gradually helps them become more confident and start liking themselves. And then, I don't know why, but the bullies just seem to disappear. The more confident they become, the bullies sort of disappear. I would just like to say, it's a process as well, isn't it? Nothing happens overnight. And, like when I work with teenagers, it takes time. It does
Right.
take time.
Mm.
It takes time to change our habits and how we talk to ourselves and all of this. And I think, and parents as well, I just think we all need to be able to work on ourselves. It's our responsibility, but sometimes we don't know how to do it. We might need some help. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ultimately it's about us at the end of the day, isn't it? Okay, children is different, but for parents, I think we need to be able to work on ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and have the courage to listen to how we're feeling, because it's not always easy.
Jasmine, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for telling us your perspective and with dealing with children. And if there's one thing we can take away from today's episode is listen.
I love that. Thank you so much, Maria. Yes, that's exactly it. Listen. That's it.